Yeah, so my name's Ty Bollinger, and I'm sitting here in Nashville, Tennessee, as you can see with the sign behind me. I'm a documentary film producer. I write books on health, run a couple of different companies. One's a supplement company, and one's a publishing company to educate people on how to be healthy. Living where I do in Nashville, Tennessee, we got a lot of big people here, right? And it wasn't always that way. And it wasn't that way growing up. I don't remember the sheer number of kids and even adults now that are not just a little bit overweight, but obese, would be considered obese. Now, some of the ways that they judge whether someone's obese or not, I don't agree with. So when I was a competitive bodybuilder, I weighed 230 pounds, and at 6'1", at 230, I was considered morbidly obese, but I had 3% body fat. So some of the ways that they measure obesity with the BMI and all that, it's not legitimate. But I won't dispute the fact that when you go out to the local stop and go, 7-Eleven, whatever, your fast food mart, you go in there, most of the people that you're going to see are going to be overweight to obese. It really was brought home to me after we traveled. With the Truth About Cancer, we traveled to Riga, Latvia a couple years ago, and we were investigating cancer treatments overseas. And in Riga is a city of about 1 million people. It's a beautiful city in Latvia. I literally did not see any obese people in Riga, a city of 1 million people. Now you contrast that with if we were to go to Atlanta or a city in the South, Dallas. You're going to see a lot of obese people. I didn't see any. Well, I actually saw 4. I can remember them. They were so odd because I was just shocked at how in shape and fit the people were. The 4 people that were obese were actually not from Latvia either, because 2 were from the United States, 2 were from England. I could tell by their accents. I went to listen to them. We walked by them. And I was like, that doesn't fit here. There's no obese people here, I'm noticing. But and I went and listened to them, and 2 were from England, 2 were from America. So why in Riga, Latvia, do they not have a problem with obesity? Well, I think it all goes back to the food. In Riga, Latvia, there are no genetically modified organisms. People don't eat packaged foods there. They don't eat canned foods much there. They eat farm to table. They grow it, they cook it, they eat it. And that's the way that we should be eating. And that's the way our grandparents ate. And that's one of the main correlations that I see between the obesity epidemic, the diabetes epidemic, the cancer epidemic. It all goes back to what has changed in our food supply. How is what we are eating different today than it was back then? And that has given rise to all of these different diseases and these different maladies that people are suffering from now. It all goes back to the food supply. Because we didn't see cancer 100 years ago at these rates. We didn't see diabetes. We didn't see obesity. What's changed? Do people now have a cancer gene? No. Do they have a diabetes gene? No. They have an obesity gene? No. They're eating food that we didn't used to eat, and it's not settling with their bodies. That's the way my grandma would have said it. That food ain't settling with you, honey. Well, the food that we're eating today is not settling with what we are supposed to be eating. And so as a result, we're getting sick. And that was the main thing that I saw going to Riga, Latvia, and then coming back home, is they don't eat these processed, genetically modified crap foods there. And then I come back home, and I still remember, I got back home, it was a couple summers ago, got back home from Latvia, hopped in the car with my family, went down to the country fair or something down south of Nashville. I stopped to get gas. I went into the gas station. I came back out, or went into the little, whatever you call it. I went into the building where they sell all the crap. I came back out to the car, and I told my wife, I said, honey, I just saw more obese people in one place than I saw in the whole city of 1 million people in Riga, Latvia. And it just blew me away. It was really a stark contrast. So the diet's changed, the food's changed, and as a result, we're getting sick. So one of the problems with the food supply today is that we're no longer eating fresh food. If you look at our grandparents, my granddad was a rancher. He had cattle and horses and goats. He grew corn, and he grew a lot of vegetables, and he worked the land. And what they ate, he had chickens. What they ate was what they grew or raised. So he had fresh eggs every morning from his hens. And I remember Grandma used to make him fresh gravy, and she'd fill it up with sausage made from the cows or the pigs that he raised. You know, sausage and meat sausage is really big down in West Texas. I mean, you don't want just plain gravy. You want meat in your gravy. So he had that. He ate a diet that many people would look at and say, wow, look at the cholesterol, look at it. But it was fresh. It was real food. So whether you're into, should it all be vegan, should you not eat meat, I'm not going to get into that debate. What I will say is that they used to eat fresh stuff that they grew themselves, and they knew what was in it. And that's what my granddad did. He lived till he was in his mid-80s. And so he actually did die of cancer. But he was in his mid-80s. He lived a good long life. And the food that he ate was real. And we don't eat real food anymore. We eat canned stuff. We eat packaged stuff. We eat stuff that's been chemically treated so that it's preserved longer. And so the problem with what we're eating today is the fact that it's not real food. It doesn't have the enzymes that we need that come with real food, with eating real fruits and vegetables, or eating real eggs. Even raw eggs are a great source of protein, in my opinion. There's a lot of foods that we eat today that weren't even on the planet 50 years ago. And so I think as a result of that, because of the fact that our diet has changed so drastically, that's the main reason that we're seeing these upticks in all these different diseases. Some of them are more than upticks. Some of them are just explosions in different diseases. And it's because we're eating differently. I mean, any mechanic will tell you that the fuel that you put in your car matters. That's just self-evident, right? It's obvious. Of course the fuel matters. You don't put Kool-Aid in your gas tank, the car won't run. But then why do medical doctors not tell us that the food that we put in our body matters? Why do they tell us that it doesn't matter what fuel you put in your body, it won't matter. It doesn't affect your disease. I don't know how many times I've interviewed cancer patients that told me that their oncologist said, it does not matter what you eat. It won't affect your disease. That's absurd. It's absurd to have a medical doctor tell you that the fuel that you put in your body doesn't matter. Of course it matters. This is a story I've told before, but when we used to live in Montana, we used to live in Kalispell, Montana, near the Glacier National Park, beautiful area of the country. We lived in Whitefish for a while as well, but we loved Montana. We were getting ready to trek across the United States to Ohio to see my wife's folks one year. This is back maybe 5-6 years ago. And I went with my son at that time. He was little. Now he's taller than I am, but little boy at that time. Bryce was only 10 years old at that time. And Bryce and I went to the local Jiffy Lube or whatever to get our oil changed in the car before we headed out across to Ohio. It was really made clear to me the problem. It was just this object lesson. You know, sometimes you get an object lesson, it just slaps you in the face. You're like, wow. So this guy comes in, this morbidly obese guy comes in. He's literally got a dozen donuts he's holding. He comes in, he goes to the counter at the Jiffy Lube, and he tells the teller there, I brought my truck in, I need you to put this certain type of oil in it. I need you to put this certain type of transmission fluid in it. I mean, he knew exactly what needed to go in his car. It was very, very specific what needed to go into his truck to make his truck run. Because he was a mechanic, apparently. Or he knew a lot about trucks and what you needed to put in them to make them run properly. Meanwhile, he's woofing down a dozen donuts. So he knew that fuel matters with a car, but he didn't apply it to himself. And I think the problem is that today, I think many people know that. I think most people know that your diet matters. I think most people know that the fuel that you put in your body actually matters, and the fuel that you put in your body will affect its performance. I think one of the problems is that we're just so undisciplined, and not just undisciplined, but there's such a wide accessibility to crap food that you can get anywhere that it makes it difficult to eat a good diet because it's so available. One of the things that I've studied recently is pet cancer. Okay, pet cancer we can treat very successfully, and a lot of it most of it's dietary based. It's putting them into ketosis, eating a ketogenic diet, getting away from the kibble, getting away from the carbohydrates, the sugar, which is a link between cancer and diabetes. I mean, the sugar is huge causing factor. But pet cancer is relatively easy to treat. Why? Why is pet cancer so easy to treat? Here's why. Pets eat what you give them. That's it. If your pet has cancer and you decide to put him into ketosis and put the pet on a ketogenic diet and treat them with hyperbaric oxygen chamber or whatever it is, which, by the way, ketogenic diet plus hyperbaric oxygen chamber have been very effective at reversing pet cancer, by the way. But if you decide to do that, that pet can't go out at midnight and snack on a half-gallon ice cream. That pet doesn't have to drive by 50 places where they can stop and get chips every day. That pet doesn't have to go into the local supermarket and bypass a million different foods. That willpower goes sometimes. I mean, you're hungry and you're like, oh, I'm just going to have a bag of chips, or I'm just going to have this or that. Pets can't do that. They eat what you give them. So if they have a good owner that knows what to give them to eat, clean food, raw food, whatever it might be, pet cancer turns around rather quickly most of the time. Human cancer doesn't. Why? Because we cheat, right? We cheat. And I think that's one of the problems, is it's just so accessible now. These foods that are causing illness are on every shelf of every store in the United States and worldwide. You can even go, I remember traveling South America and going on the shelves, the store shelves down there in Uruguay. They had crap food there too. There's crap food on every shelf in every store in the world. If you want it, you can get it. And that's the problem. And I think that's one of the problems why we're so sick, is that the accessibility to this food and the lack of the willpower to stay away from it. Because I think most people know that most of the food that they're eating, they probably shouldn't be eating. Now, some of it may be hidden. Like if we're talking about genetically modified organisms that cause cancer, right? That people don't know about that. That's not their fault. That's just, it's ubiquitous now. GMOs are everywhere. And they're in foods that they don't even tell you they're in. They're not required to label GMOs in foods. That's one of the problems with diabetes as well. It's one of the problems with cancer. There was a study that was done, it was released in 2014, I think it was called the Seralini study. And this was a professor in France, and he studied genetically modified organisms to see if they caused cancer. And they were actually causing diabetes as well in rats. Now, Monsanto performed studies on rats too, and they determined that GMOs were safe. Seralini and his colleagues performed studies, and they found out that GMOs were dangerous, that they caused cancer. And then, like I said, I believe there was even a diabetic link with the GMOs there. I'm not certain. So what was the difference in the studies? This will get you here. Monsanto said that Seralini had used the wrong kind of rats. That Seralini used what was called Sprague Dawley rats. It was a certain strain of rat. And Monsanto said you shouldn't have used those rats. Those rats are more prone to cancer. And Monsanto also accused Seralini and his colleagues of using the wrong number of rats. They said you didn't use enough rats in the study. You only examined 10, which was the sample size. And so because of the fact that you used the Sprague Dawley rats and only used 10 of them, your findings are not valid. Even though they found cancer in upwards of 80% of the rats, most of them died early. And then by the end of the study, they had, I believe it was 80% of the rats had cancer. So here's the kicker. Monsanto used the same rats. They used Sprague Dawley rats too. They used the same number of rats in all their tests too. Monsanto only tested 10 in all their studies. So what's the difference? Monsanto quit testing at 90 days. Their samples stopped at 90 days. They didn't look at the rats past 90 days. They fed them GMO corn for 90 days, and they said, hey, none of them have cancer. It's safe. Seralini and his colleagues kept feeding them the GMO corn, and in about 150 days, they started getting tumors. And by the 2-year mark, most of them had cancer or were dead. So who falsified the study? It wasn't Seralini, Monsanto. So that Seralini study, Monsanto and Big Agri, the GMO pushers, have done everything in their power to make that look like an invalid study and to push that under the carpet and act like it never happened. But the reality is that's the only difference in the studies. The only difference in the studies is that Seralini and his colleagues carried it out long enough so that they could see cancer, and Monsanto didn't give it enough time. It'd be like if I grabbed you by the hair and held your head underwater for 5 seconds, pulled you up and said, you know what, I just proved that water doesn't cause drowning. Try that for 2 minutes. Try it for 3 minutes, you get a different outcome. GMO grains, GMO corn, most certainly causes cancer. That study proved that. And it's been linked with diabetes. It's been linked with other diseases as well. So that's one of these foods that people are eating that they don't know about, is the GMOs, and that's a big problem. And that's why, it's really important to contact your legislators and to get on board with GMO labeling. At least if you're going to use this stuff in our food that causes cancer, at least tell us it's there. And most people have no idea that much of the food that they eat are GMOs, and that's the problem. See, GMO corn is in everything. Anytime that you pick up a packaged food, it says corn solids, high fructose corn syrup, which is what they use to sweeten sodas now, high fructose corn syrup. If they're not using aspartame, which causes brain cancer and eats holes in your brains, that's the diet version, then they're sweetening it. They used to sweeten it with sugar. That was bad enough, but at least it was natural sugar. Now they sweeten it with high fructose corn syrup that's GMO. So if you're drinking sodas that are sweetened with high fructose corn syrup, or it's in everything, it's all the packaged foods. If you look in the packaged foods, you're going to see high fructose corn syrup is an ingredient. You're going to see corn solids is an ingredient. It's GMO. It's in everything. It's in over 90% of packaged foods. One of the things that we have to realize is that what we're eating is either making us healthy or it's making us sick. And I think people don't realize that at times. I think they think, well, I'm gonna eat some fun foods. And I'm not against fun foods. Okay? Sometimes you can have some fun foods. And that's okay. But we need to remember that the majority of what we eat needs to be food that makes us healthy. So, granted, if you're eating food that's junk food, initially it excites the pleasure sensors in your body, right? So you're gonna feel great when you get that sugar high, or the super salty chips taste great. They elicit a response in your body. You're like, wow, that's awesome. But then what always happens after you eat food that's not good for you? You feel bad, right? That's the problem, is that long term, these foods that give us short term highs are really, really bad for us long term. So I would recommend that people attempt to remember as they're eating that the food is not something that we're eating primarily to stimulate pleasure. That the food we should be looking at as fuel for health. And if you look at food as being fuel for your long-term health, then maybe it's not so important that you have that bag of salty chips, or maybe it's not so important that you get a couple of scoops of ice cream after this meal, because those chips and that ice cream will lead to long-term suffering if done over and over. Now, like I said, I'm not the food Nazi, and you can't ever have a bowl of ice cream or chips. I'm not saying that, but it's the pattern of eating. And I think that what we need to get into is a pattern of eating that looks as the food that we're eating as fuel for our long-term health in our body. And if we do that, then the choices that we make will be different. And you'll also be able to stomach some things that maybe you wouldn't have tried to eat before. For instance, every day I'll drink a green shake with a green powder that I shake up in water and drink. And I think it tastes good. Many people don't like greens, but I do it because it's good for me. I mean, if I was going to make my choices on what I ate based solely upon what something tasted like, then I'd have pizza every meal, because I love pizza. It's my favorite food. I could eat pizza every meal. I'd eat it for breakfast. I'd eat it cold for breakfast. I'd eat it underneath ice cream for dessert. But that's not good for me. And so if I do eat pizza, we make healthy pizza. We can make a crust with gluten-free organic flour, or even cauliflower. You can make cauliflower crust, and you put vegetables and fresh tomato sauce on top, a little bit of raw cheese. It's awesome. Now, many people wouldn't like it. If they're used to going down to the local pizza shop and getting, a 2-inch thick, greasy meat lovers supreme, and then they go eat our veggie pizza made on cauliflower crust, they might go, that doesn't taste all that great. But the reality is, I love it. Why? Because it tastes good to me, and I know it's giving me health. And so a lot of things that you eat, if you keep that in mind, you'll probably widen the number of foods that you can eat, right? Your menu will increase, as opposed to eating a few narrow things that are the only things that taste good to you. And that's one of the things that we try to do with our kids, is that this is what you're eating. So if you don't want your stomach to be rumbly tonight, that's what's for dinner. People will ask me, parents ask, how do you get your kids to eat healthy? Because that's all we give them. They will eat, right? It's like the movie with Kevin Costner. If you build it, they will come, right? I can't remember what movie. It was a baseball movie. He built a big tore down a cornfield and built a baseball field there. If you build it, they will come. All right, you know what? If you serve it, they will eat if that's all they have to eat. Right? The problem is that most parents will say, "Oh, sorry, Johnny, you don't like the asparagus and salad. That's okay. Just here's some ice cream for you." And that's the problem. So how do you get your kids to eat healthy? You feed them healthy food, and that's it. If they don't eat it, they go hungry. Believe me, it won't be long till they're eating the food. And so one of the things that you'll find if you're eating healthy food that nourishes your body and gives it fuel so that it can be healthy is that your taste buds change when you get into a pattern of eating that way. I used to eat a very unhealthy diet. I didn't know any better. We just grew up eating certain foods. I grew up in Texas, and we ate fried chicken and pizza and roast beef, and not that there's anything wrong with doing that occasionally, but that was what we ate every day. And so I didn't really have a taste for healthy food. And when I first learned about what I should be eating and eating organic and lots of fruits and vegetables and laying off the bad oils and the bread and the dairy and all these things, when I started learning about that, my taste buds actually changed. And at first it was a little bit more difficult, but now I love the food that we eat because my taste buds have changed and they've kind of adapted to that. And to be honest with you, if I went and ate like one of the burgers that I used to eat, I won't list a certain brand here, but there was a certain there was a certain fast food restaurant that I used to frequent through college and even afterwards, and there was a certain burger that they made that I used to eat like it was candy. I think if I ate that today, it'd probably make me sick, but I was used to it then. So your taste buds change, and again, taste buds change because mentally, there's a lot of mental to your taste, right? It's what you think the food's going to taste like. And when you're eating this food that's really super healthy, and you're realizing how much it's going to give you life, it's going to give you long-term stability, it's going to stop long-term degenerative disease, it's going to nourish your body so that your body can run the way it's supposed to and your body can do the healing, that food's going to taste better because there's a big mental aspect to the way foods taste. But if you look at that same food and you go, this doesn't taste like the burgers and fries and pizza I'm used to eating, you take a bite of it, it's going to taste terrible. And so there's a lot of mental aspect to it, to the way that foods taste. And there's a lot of, I could tell you stories of people that have been blindfolded and told they were eating something and they really weren't. They were eating something else, and it was something that would have normally repulsed them that they liked, and something that they would have normally liked repulsed them because they were told it was something else and they couldn't see it, and in their mind they thought it was something else and they actually liked a food they would never have eaten. That experiment has been done. So again, keep that mindset as you're eating healthy food. This is going to nourish my body. And foods don't cure disease. Herbs don't cure disease. Nothing cures disease except you. Your body cures disease. Our bodies are self-healing mechanisms. Our bodies were made to heal. And so the key with eating the foods that are healthy and nourishing is not that they're going to cure disease. They're not going to cure. Eating a raw diet won't cure diabetes. But juicing and eating a raw diet will nourish your body so much that it can cure diabetes, right? Eating certain diets, foods, herbs won't cure cancer, but they'll nourish your body and your body will do the curing. So kind of sounds funny from a guy that's done documentaries called The Quest for the Cures, trying to find the cure for cancer. I don't think there are cures for cancer. I think there are hundreds of natural foods, herbs, supplements, protocols, whatever you want to call them, that nourish your body with the fuel that it's supposed to get, and then it runs properly, and then it does the healing. So your body is what does the curing. Not the food, not the substance, not the herb, not the supplement. Your body is what does the healing. But the big caveat, it can't do the healing if you're not giving it the right fuel. So sugar is a big problem with our diets today. Sugar is added to most packaged foods, most canned foods. If you look at the ingredients, sometimes it's one of the top 2 or 3 ingredients, sugar. Sugar is a problem for several reasons. Number one, sugar is a problem from my perspective with both cancer and diabetes because it's actually causative in those diseases. Sugar fuels cancer cells. The way that cancer cells produce energy is by what's called anaerobic respiration. They ferment. Okay, they don't use oxygen. They are anaerobic. They're without oxygen. So how do they produce energy? They ferment. What do you ferment? Sugar. So sugar fuels cancer cells directly. As a matter of fact, cancer cells cannot live without sugar. They die off. That's why when I spoke earlier about the ketogenic diet for healing pet cancer, that's one of the reasons it works. When you're on a ketogenic diet, you're not taking in any sugar. Very, very nominal amounts of natural sugars, no processed sugar. And so the cancer cells, they don't have fuel. They die off because you're not feeding them. So that's the main problem with sugar, is that you're actually fueling cancer when you're eating sugar. And of course with diabetes, we all know that sugar is a huge issue with diabetes. But it's the refined sugars that are the problem. So people say, well, hey, should I not eat blueberries? Should I not eat strawberries? Should I not eat grapes? Watermelon? It's different eating a natural food, a fresh organic fruit vegetable that has sugar content, than taking the white processed sugar and pouring it over your food or mixing it with your food and eating it. It's totally different. And again, now, if you're a cancer patient, do you want to live on watermelon and grapes? Probably not. But there's no reason you shouldn't be able to have moderate amounts of natural fruits that have sugar in them. But you should absolutely not add sugar to your food. And you should absolutely not eat desserts, sweets, candies that are nothing but sugar. That's why it's so absurd to me, in all my travels the last several years, learning about the cancer and what fuels it and what modern oncology is doing to treat it. It just blows my mind that I've heard from dozens, if not more, cancer patients that when they go to their treatment at the oncology ward and they leave, they've done their chemo and they go out and they leave the office, at the front desk there's always a jar of candy so that you can get a pick-me-up, because the cancer patients they're wasting away. Many of them have what's called cachexia. They're wasting away. So what do? The oncologist puts a big big jar of candy right there. So after you just destroyed your body with chemotherapy and chemically poisoned it, you can go fuel the cancer more by eating more sugar. It's absurd to me that's the way that we treat cancer. And that's why we're not successful. Because oncologists are not looking at the root cause of cancer, and they're not asking patients to remove the fuel. And if you remove the fuel, cancer dies. And that's, if you have a big Formula One race car, it can't go anywhere without fuel. It might be the most powerful car in the world, but if that tank's empty, it's not going anywhere. And so people look at cancer as this devastating disease, and it certainly is, and it devastates lives, and I'm not making light of that, but they look at it as this uncontrolled cell growth that there's nothing we can do about. But we can remove the fuel, and many times it goes away.